Hello and welcome. You find yourself checking out an American Defense Recon 2-inch offset quick release mount. This is courtesy of me because I've bought this with my own money. Why? Well, it's actually not to use on any sort of particular rifle, it's to use on my recording rig. See, the reason why I opted for this mount in particular was because you could buy different clamshells. This just so happens to be set up for 30 millimeter, and it's really easy to swap this off with a 34 or 35 or even a 1-inch mount. You have these 4 screws on the side. These clamshells come off of this center section right here. You then slap on your new clamshells and you're off to the races. Now, that's to say that I did not buy this new. I bought this used for a fairly decent price. However, this is not that expensive brand new. This is about $200. It's a little bit more if you buy this version with the tack levers. I think it's only about $10 extra, and I have to say, this little ramp over here makes releasing this incredibly easy by comparison to the standard mounts right here, which are flat. Yes, these do sit in a little bit flatter, obviously, but it's a lot harder to get your finger in there and twist out as opposed to this, which you could really put the whole pad of your thumb on it and twist. So difference being with these two, this is a standard quick release lever with the flat one, which you really have to use the tip of your thumb to get onto it. And if you get this thing nice and tight, it makes it quite difficult. Now, an easier way of doing it is to use the pad of your thumb underneath, but guess what's in the way when you do it like this? Your rifle. So regular levers, tack levers, worth it. I'm going to pick up this one because this one's a little bit cleaner, a little bit newer, and one of the primary ones that I use for my reviews. Now, I have 2 of these because I've bought this one by itself, and this one came on a scope that I bought to review, which was very gracious of the seller to sell it at the price that he did, but I will get involved in that when I start reviewing the actual scope. Now, like I do with most of my mounts, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. One really nice feature that I like about these mounts is obviously the quick release, which for my purposes is fantastic, but for you it might not be an ideal situation. If you're not looking for quick release mounts, don't bother. If you don't ever plan on taking your optic off of your firearm and either having backup iron sights or a completely different scope, like if you had an LPVO on this and then a 3-18 in this and or a backup red dot that you want to throw on in case something fails, great. Quick release levers are awesome, but do you need them? You got to ask yourself that question, because what these do is not only add weight, but also bulk. It makes it really wide, and on AR-15, it's not the end of the world, but if you're putting this on a bolt gun, you got to worry about clearancing for your action. Now, most of my guns are right-handed. Well, all my guns are right-handed, but if you had a left-hand bolt, this is not going to work. Now, who's going to be putting this on a bolt gun? Other than myself, I don't really know, but it's something to take note of. Anyway, one really nice feature I like about these is that you can adjust the tension on your pick rail with this little nut here. So this is spring loaded, or I should say this clamp over here is spring loaded. You can see the springs in there. And what you do is you completely unlock the lever and you push. This little lock nut over here can be spun either counterclockwise to loosen it or clockwise to loosen it. It's standard right-hand threads. The one thing you got to make sure you do is get it clocked properly, because if not, it's not going to seat in. You can see it's not really seated there, but you push, you rotate, and if you don't get it right, it'll guide itself in when you're really close. This is a feature that I really appreciate, because not every 1913 rail might have the exact same dimensions widthwise as another. Now, obviously, both front and rear claws are the same in regards to that. Another thing I really like about these mounts is look at how much surface area you have attached to the rail itself. This entire side is making contact with your rail, and you can see how much pressure it puts on the top of the rail from the indent marks on the bottom. It's just kissing the anodizing, rubbing back and forth a little bit. There's no damage to it, it's just witness marks. Again, look at the size of the claws on this as opposed to, well, the one that I have next to me, the Geisley Super Precision. It's nearly twice the size. Twice the size means twice the surface contact, and a lot more clamping force can be applied as a result without putting extra strain on the levers itself. Really nice feature. So right off the bat, really, really nice. Another nice thing that American Defense offers is this in different throws. This is the 2-inch version. They have a 1-inch and I believe a 0. So pick your poison on which one you prefer. Honestly, I wish these were 0s because typically when I take this off of my recording rig and onto one of my rifles to test the optic itself, I have to run this most of the way off the back of my rail, and that's just so that I can see through it properly. Now, let me show you how these clamshells come apart. Now, the best way to do this is to remove your top 2 screws all the way. So with the top 2 screws out, these bottom screws are still tight. You see that gap on top? It makes it so much easier when you're securing a scope in here that you don't have to worry about closing one side then the other. You lock up the bottom and then you secure the top. But you got to do it evenly, because if not, you can run the risk of cocking these rings forward and these slightly back, and you could damage the scope. Okay, so now here comes a slight issue, and it's one that I have to say is a negative with this system. It makes it extremely difficult to get an optic in there and these clamshells on and keep everything sort of stable while you're trying to secure it and have it not get thrown around. If I had an optic in here right now and both these clamshells were loose, everything's going to be moving around. Even if I have it in something like this, which is what I typically use to mount all of my scopes in these mounts, you still have to play a balancing act with everything to make sure that it doesn't get jostled around too much. And that's my only criticism with this. So now these clamshells come off and you have your base. You can see right here in the middle, there is a hole for this dowel pin to go through that keeps it all sort of lined up. And this is where you have your female threads for your fasteners. When you look at this as a whole, to think about how much this costs, these go for around $200, are American made and made to a very high quality standard. And there's a good reason why you can do it like this. Me coming from a machinist background, I know what it takes to machine something like this and have these pockets over here be as perfectly true to one another as can be. It takes an awful lot. A lot of setup time, machine time, programming time, and then you have to hope that you don't scrap it. With this, if I remove this other clamshell or just simply put my hand over here, you have a small chunk of aluminum that you have to make sure is perfect that mostly has straight lines going on. This inside radius, that doesn't really count. This surface counts, but this is all going to get machined together. Again, if you had something like this ScalarWorks, look at how much machining goes into the outside profile and then the inside profile over here. It's a lot of work. That's why this is half the price of this and has a lot of really nice features, with the exception of that set screw to level your scope. But, you know, you could very easily do this by yourself if you wanted to, even though there's not a whole lot of meat right here, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot going on here because American Defense designed this to be, well, smart. And that's some of the best things about it. It's priced and how smartly this is made. The only real criticism I have are how these clamshells go together. I kind of wish, again, that there was something that can keep that secured, but this is the way it is. Now, unlike the Geisley Super Precision, you can see that there is enough of a flat spot here that you can take your caliper vernier, slide it under your scope, twist up, and secure it. And because of the way this clamshell is designed, you have it on a base like this or on your rifle instead of a vise. It's really easy to do it with only 2 hands. Beautiful. It is chunky on the side, and again, don't put this on a left-handed bolt action, but if you're using this on a standard AR like most of you will be doing it, it's not going to be really that obtrusive. The only thing, again, are these little levers over here on the quick releases. Now, as far as how heavy these are, they are a little bit on the heavier side, granted, but you have an awesome quick release system and a really nice clamshell system. Is it worth it for you? Well, do you see yourself ever having to take this off of your gun? Do you really need the quick release? Do you see yourself changing optics between a 30, 34, 35 millimeter 1-inch tube all the time? This might not be for you. For me, it's almost perfect. And that's why I have two of them. I wouldn't trade these for almost any other mount out there currently, especially for the price. But will it work for you? Granted, it is heavier than the Super Precision, and the Scalar works by a considerable margin, 1 ounce and almost 2 ounces respectively. But is that going to be a real issue for you? Only you can answer that. The only real caveat I might have about this is the finish. You see this in the back? That happens all the time. You put your fingernail on it by accident, you drag it across something, and the anodizing will get marked up. It cleans off fairly well, but when you compare it to something like the other two competitors we have here, it's not as nice. But again, $200, $400, $320, and keep in mind, there's a slew of other mounts in between here. So call me a little bit biased if you want, but this is a really nice mount. It ticks all of my personal boxes 100%, and I wouldn't change it with the exception of maybe having this be a 1-inch or a 0, but that's about it. If you're on a little bit more of a budget, you really want the quick release features, and you can do with or without the clamshells, look no further for an awesome mount. Thank you very much for watching. See you again next time. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.